Did you see how hard he smacked them on Truth Social? We'll get to that in a bit. Tucker Carlson and his advocacy for a weak America and a strong Russia and China and Iran. And Candace Owens and her bizarre Nazi Nouveau rhetoric. And Alex Jones and his constant conspiracy-laden low IQ crap. And Megyn Kelly and her clique-chasing abandonment of all principle. They aren't just wrong, they're undermining what it would mean for America to actually be great.
So Ben Shapiro just fired back at Trump's Truth Social call-out of conservative media figures who've been criticizing the Iran ceasefire. He's arguing they're actually undermining American strength by parroting enemy propaganda. We're going to break down his strategic analysis of why the ceasefire shows strength, not weakness.
President Trump's ceasefire is a win-win. Either it's going to work or it's not going to work. And either way, America will end up winning. Because President Trump is going to solidify his legacy as the greatest foreign policy president in modern American history. Nothing less will suffice. It's the reason he's doing it.
This win-win framing is crucial. Trump has already decimated Iran's military capabilities, their leadership dead, infrastructure destroyed. Now he's offering negotiations from a position of total dominance. If Iran accepts, America wins diplomatically. If they refuse, America's already won militarily and maintains all leverage for the next phase.
That's what President Trump's enemies on the right now oppose. They want a weaker America. They're posing as America first. What they actually are is America toast. And they say it openly. They say all the time things like they want America to retreat from the world. We're already too weak. We're bloated and we're falling apart. And that the best American future actually looks like France. Declining, pathetic, amoral, addicted to welfare programs, importing mass labor from third world countries thanks to a ridiculously flabby welfare state, a social fabric that is no longer workable. These are the people who seem to think that the best global future looks like a future where China and Russia run 2/3 of the planet.
The irony is stark. These figures brand themselves as America first while advocating retreat that would hand 2/3 of the world to China and Russia. They're pushing the exact isolationist policies that created the power vacuums China filled in the South China Sea and Russia exploited in Eastern Europe.
Again, this isn't about people asking honest questions about what President Trump is doing. There are all sorts of questions that can be asked about what President Trump is doing, and all those questions deserve answers. It is about people who are actively rooting for America to lose and openly say so, and openly say so. Okay, so
this distinction matters. Legitimate policy debates are healthy, questioning tactics, timeline, or strategy. But actively hoping American operations fail crosses into something else entirely. It's the difference between loyal opposition and what amounts to cheering for enemy propaganda talking points to prove correct.
Iran has been deeply wounded. Over the course of the last several weeks, Iran has been brought low. This notion that Iran is bestriding the Middle East like a colossus because they have the capacity to fire some drones at shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is asinine. It's asinine. It doesn't mean it's not a problem. It is a problem. But this bizarre notion that Iran somehow is the big victor here is crazy towns. It's crazy towns and it's propagandistic nonsense. Let's start with how much damage we've actually done to Iran at this point.
Exactly right. Iran's Strait of Hormuz actions aren't projection of strength. They're desperation moves. When a regime resorts to choking off global trade routes, alienating even allies like China, that's the playbook of a cornered power making last-ditch attempts to gain any negotiating leverage whatsoever.
It's a sign of Iranian weakness. They could have done this crap any time over the past 20 years. The reason they didn't do it is because they understood it was basically the last gasp of a dying regime. The reason that you try to seize global trading and alienate all the Gulf allies, and by the way, also China, which receives oil from the Strait of Hormuz, is because you are weak, not because you are strong. It is a last gasp attempt to grab some sort of leverage. That is what that is.
This strategic read is spot on. Iran could have disrupted Hormuz shipping anytime over 2 decades, but didn't because they understood it would mark them as a pariah state. Doing it now, when China desperately needs that oil, shows how completely isolated and weakened they've become.
We've killed all the heads of the IRGC. We killed the Ayatollah. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, is missing a leg and is in a coma. Because Their Air Force is gone. Their Navy is gone. Their military has been heavily bombarded. Okay, so that's why you end up with the ceasefire. So when I say that this is a win-win, here is what I mean. There are a few good reasons why you do the ceasefire. First of all, you show goodwill that if the Strait were to reopen and Iran were to negotiate an end to its nuclear program, that would be the end of the war, which is what Trump has said literally from the beginning. This is why it's hilarious. All these people saying, well, his goal is regime change. He never said it was regime change. In fact, he overtly kept saying it wasn't regime change. It was regime change behavior, that the behavior should change. So either they're going to prove it or they're not going to prove it.
The damage assessment is staggering. IRGC leadership eliminated. Heir apparent in a coma. Ballistic missile sites destroyed. Air Force and Navy neutralized. Offering a ceasefire after inflicting this level of devastation isn't weakness. It's magnanimity from a position of overwhelming victory.
Pakistan is basically a Chinese proxy at this point. Period. China was begging the United States to stop here because China has been deprived of some 37% of the oil that is coming through the Strait of Hormuz. They are the largest single recipient of all oil from the Strait of Hormuz. 33% of all of their oil imports come directly from the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is choking that off. China's not getting its oil right now, which harms China significantly more than it harms, say, the United States. So the United States, as a goodwill gesture to China, is offering Iran a path out.
The China angle reveals Trump's strategic genius. Beijing gets 37% of their oil through Hormuz. Iran's disruption hurts China more than America. By offering this ceasefire, Trump simultaneously helps China while demonstrating American reasonableness, potentially improving broader U.S.-China relations from a position of strength.
It doesn't make any sense because it cuts directly against the purpose of President Trump doing this, which is a stronger America. There would be knock-on effects if Iran were able to just maintain complete control over the Strait and no deal took place and the U.S. just walked away. Yes, they would be greatly weakened, but it would send some pretty bad messages. Like, for example, that any country could talk the United States into abandoning core national interests over shutting down serious trade routes. China might take notice of that, for example, because the Taiwan Strait, which, you know, like it's called the Taiwan Strait because it passes right by Taiwan. It carries 20% of all global maritime trade. It carries something like 90% of the world's largest ships by tonnage. So if China takes away the lesson that shutting off a trade corridor is leverage against the United States sufficient to deter us from our core national interests, that's a problem.
The Taiwan parallel is critical. The Taiwan Strait handles 20% of global maritime trade and 90% of the world's largest cargo ships. If America appears weak on defending maritime trade routes, China might calculate they can blockade Taiwan without serious American response. Credibility on Hormuz affects deterrence in the Pacific.
They've been buying into Russian propaganda and Iranian propaganda, and they've been mirroring all of it. And this is why they say dumb things like the president was leveraged into this by the Israelis. The Israelis are yanking the chain. Okay, if the Israelis were yanking the chains, do you think the ceasefire would have happened in the first place? The Israelis are not particularly happy with the ceasefire. The president declared that because he wanted to declare it. In the same way, the president declared the war in Gaza over because he wanted to declare the war in Gaza over. The president is the one holding the end of every chain. That is the way it works in geopolitics when you run the world's most powerful military. So, Iran decided to basically run an op as to why they were not going to reopen the Strait.
The propaganda point cuts deep. These figures are literally echoing Iranian and Russian talking points about American weakness and Israeli manipulation. Meanwhile, Israel's frustration with the ceasefire actually proves Trump's independence. He's making decisions based on American interests, not external pressure.
They're declaring dead people their leaders. Mojtaba Khomeini is not the actual leader of Iran. Mojtaba Khomeini is in a coma, and they declared him the leader, and they are tweeting under his name right now. Again, none of this is the mark of a powerful regime. All of this is a mark of a regime that is on its last leg. Not last legs, last leg.
The comatose leader detail is darkly absurd. Iran is literally tweeting from their unconscious heir apparent's account to maintain the illusion of functioning leadership. This isn't the behavior of a confident regional power. It's weekend at Bernie's with geopolitical consequences.
And listen, folks, if you had listened to my show for a few years, You had been early on this one. He put out a statement, quote, I know why Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens, and Alex Jones have all been fighting me for years, especially by the fact they think it is wonderful for Iran, the number one state sponsor of terror, to have a nuclear weapon, because they have one thing in common, low IQs. They're stupid people. They know it. Their families know it, and everyone else knows it. Look at their past. Look at their record. They don't have what it takes, and they never did. They've all been thrown off TV, lost their shows, and aren't even invited on TV because nobody cares about them. They're nut jobs, troublemakers, and will say anything necessary for some free and cheap publicity. That last part is definitely true. Now they think they get some clicks because they have third-rate podcasts, but nobody's talking about them. Their views are the opposite of MAGA, or I wouldn't have won the presidential election in a landslide. MAGA agrees with me, says the president, and just gave CNN a 100% approval rating of Trump, not hand-flailing fools like Tucker Carlson, who couldn't even finish college.
Trump's True Social post validates years of warnings about these figures. Anyone attacking efforts to prevent Iranian nuclear weapons while Iran's regime tweets from comatose leaders' accounts has fundamentally lost the plot. The contrast between their hysteria and Iran's actual collapse is stark.
MAGA is about making America great again, and these people have no idea how to do that. But I do, because the United States is now the hottest country anywhere in the world, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so, again, is the president wrong about that? I don't see why he would be. I do not see why he would be. Because the reality is, once again, the president of the United States is facing down people who fairly openly are rooting for American weakness and are willing to buy into any trash conspiracy theory in order to bolster their own ratings and in order to get the clicks.
The bottom line is devastating. These figures have prioritized personal brands over American success. They're so invested in being contrarian that they're rooting against operations that have crippled America's enemies. That's not patriotic skepticism. That's clickbait masquerading as principle.